The long existence of the Roman Empire had everything to do with the legions. While the legions were strong, Rome was strong. Conversely, the disintegration of the empire had everything to do with the disintegration of the legions as effective fighting forces. The classical Roman legion, a marvel of the ancient world, being still to this day looked at as the showing of what discipline and organization can enable an army to do. Of this legendary army, we shall see all of the ways of its evolution of the legion. Specifically, we're going to be covering the legion of the 1st century BC all the way to the organization and reforms of Augustus in the Principate. We start from the far-flung time of the Cimbrian Wars of 113 to 101 BC, where Rome's expansionism comes into conflict with the immigrating population of the Cimbri and Teutons, which come from Jutland, modern-day Denmark. At this time, the Roman army had a strict leash to who can and who cannot become a soldier. Firstly, you had to have land. This meant that the landless poor didn't have a chance of getting into the army. Then, you must have bought all of the equipment of war with your money. This system proved to be disastrous for the Romans, as we can see from the biggest defeat of Rome at that time, the Battle of Arusio, where 80,000 legionnaires lost their lives. This made the Romans go into panic mode. This is where the prominent general Gaius Marius had been elected consul, and he initiated his reforms to the Roman army. Firstly, he dealt away with the requirement of land to become a soldier. Secondly, he made it so that the state would pay for the equipment of the soldier. This made manpower almost a non-existent problem. Plus, he added the service of the legion to a maximum of 16 years, making the legions more experienced and qualitatively better. The next reform of Gaius Marius was to the structure of the armies, from a mandible formation, which was loosely based and had a manpower of 240, to a cohort, which was a condensed square which consisted of 600 men, which was further subdivided to 6 centuries. A century was a 100-strong force, in which 80 personnel were legionnaires, and 20 were non-combatants, usually being engineers, slaves, and so on. The impact of these reforms were immense, but a notable one was the supposed final nail in the coffin of the Roman Republic, due to the separation of the loyalty of the legions from the state to the general. This made civil wars in the future inevitable. Now let's talk about the equipment during this time. The standard legionnaire wore for protection a torso piece, usually a padded lorica hamatata, but during the reign of Augustus, a more standardized armor would become the lorica segmentata, which briefly was a padded layered broad iron stripped armor that went around the body and was strapped on by leather. This was also put on usually on top of a tunic. This armor, due to the reasons of being padded and not a whole piece, made it so it was very light and maneuverable, as well as it was defensively very good. For greaves as well as the usual helmet of this time was the Gallic helmet, and of course there was the shield scutum, which was as defensive as offensive, because of its possibility of ramming somebody, dealing massive damage to the person. The standard weapon set consisted of the gladius, which was a universal Roman sword, the punio, which was a small dagger as a side weapon in case of the gladius being lost or broken, and the ever-known pilum, which was a javelin-like projectile which Marius in his reforms made it so that it had a wooden end on it, which made it so that as the javelin impacted a shield, for example, it would bend, making the enemy unable to throw it back. Now we skip about 100 years to the reign of Augustus, where we see another important set of overhauls to the Roman army. These reforms were targeted at the serving post of the soldier, whereby the full required length would become 20 years and not 6. And he also built upon Marius and made a standing army, which was unlike the Roman Republic one, which was mixed with landless peasants and rich aristocrats. The army of Augustus would become a volunteer only. Also, due to the fact of the excessive public land grants to the soldiers that have finished their service, Augustus, because of this, reformed it so that it sometimes was a monetary reward of 3,000 denarii, which was to a soldier the same as an amount of 13 years' worth of salary. A yearly salary is about 225 denarii for a soldier. That, for comparison, is about $270,000 in today's money. To fund this expenditure, he increased the tax inheritance by 5%, and a 1% tax was added on auction sales. Augustus modified the command structure to reflect its new permanent professional nature of the army. Augustus also added a command leader to the legion, that being the legatus or legate, to command for several years. This position was appointed by the emperor himself. In addition, Augustus established a new post of praefectus castorum, literally the prefect of the camp. To fill this position, often an ongoing centurio primus pilus, a legion's chief centurion. This is all for today. Thank you for watching this episode, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good day.